Hi, I'm Mark Clogholm from the Photographer Academy, and welcome to Speedlight Introduction. In other words, you've just got it out of the box and you want to take a photograph within minutes. Okay? That's really what this is designed for. So the first things we're going to do is, remember when I refer to Speedlight, we're talking about this portable flash that is designed to actually go on top of a camera hot shoe as such. Remember, it's called a hot shoe, it's intelligent, so make sure you don't damage it. I mean, that's kind of the thing. So there's some intelligent pins on the bottom of a Speedlight, and there's going to be intelligent communication on the top of the actual hot shoe itself. You want to be careful of those. So if we've just taken the flash out of the box, okay, I presume you've put the batteries in already. They'll all take a different combination, a different variety, whatever it is. And basically we need to switch them on. So if we kind of come across towards here and I switch it on, this is just a little bit of a kind of a pull down switch, and straight away it's on. However, the one in my hand, if I did exactly the same thing, I need to press and hold the on until it's on, as it were. Okay, so that's how we're switching it on and off, by either the button or by the switch. Next thing, it's putting it on the camera for the first time. What I would recommend to you, that the camera is off and the Speedlight is off when you make the connection, just to minimize any problems. Pretty much I've never had an issue, but you never know, okay? When we're putting it on top of the hot shoe, this one takes a bit of a kind of a turn wheel to actually kind of put it in place. Whereas the one on camera here, it's just this little kind of gripper switch over to the side. Okay, so I just push it on, then I push it to the side. Whereas on the other flash that I've got in my hand, this is the little bit of the kind of the wheel that actually tightens it. Be careful you don't over tighten your Speedlights, and be careful not to tighten the Speedlight enough. That didn't help you, did it? But what I don't want to do is actually cause the kind of the damage on there. At this stage, we're almost ready to shoot, okay? As soon as we switch on the camera as such, and we switch on the Speedlight, pretty much you're going to see, in this case, it's ETTL, it's Canon's through the lens evaluative metering with it. And there's one thing I would encourage you to learn how to do on your Speedlight straight away, and that would be to reset it, because I guarantee you're going to make some mistakes. So in other words, you can see here these two little buttons together, if they're pressed, will reset, and a signal has come up here, cleared. It means anything that I've set up on the camera has now cleared itself, and we're not going to have any real problems. So camera on, flash on. Most of you will point the Speedlight flash. Remember, this is exploding gas. It's rectangle in shape because it's trying to mirror the CCD of the camera itself. It's only got a light kind of rectangle, so that's why it's rectangle in shape. Whereas studio flash is round, it's given us a kind of a sunlight quality. Everything that we're going to be doing with this light now is going to basically either make it a good photograph or not as good photograph. Beauty is always in the eye of the beholder. There's nothing ever wrong with a photograph. It just might not be as good as the last one you took. However, if you're going to take a photograph like this and you're basically just going to kind of shoot it, when we're in the TTL mode, it would give me a correct exposure then of the subject in front of me based on if I've got a workable ISO and aperture combination. What does that mean? Well, there's a triangle in exposure, which we know, which is ISO. The higher the ISO, so 100, 200, 400, 800, and so on, as we increase the number, its sensitivity is gaining, okay? So we don't usually go above 400 ISO as a rule of thumb, but you can. Next part is going to be shutter speed. Shutter speed with flash basically doesn't really come into the equation unless the ambient light in the scene is too much compared to the flash itself. So in other words, if we had a very slow shutter speed and if we had a wide open aperture of f2.8, 3.5, it might mean that the ambient light in the photograph is actually greater or equal to the flash, so you won't see the effect as much. Or if the shutter speed is set too high, the flash isn't able to give its full power in its normal mode. So we need to actually look at how we can kind of maximize and use that kind of higher shutter speed level and the slower shutter speed as well. But in the reality is we pick this up in TTL mode, you point it at a subject, you're going to get an image. The first thing I would do to change that quality is to change its direction. The first things first is just tilt the flash gun up from its 90-degree position, as we can see on this flash here. Okay, that's in the 90 degree. Then we actually kind of tilt this up. And then by tilting this up, we bring up the catchlight card, which is this little white kind of bounce card. I can do exactly the same on here, okay? So this is the direct shot, yeah? If I want to bounce light it, I can kind of tilt this up. However, now not as much of the light is going to fall onto the subject in front of me because I'm moving its position. So to use a little bit more of the bounce light, we're putting the wide angle diffuser down, as you can see, and then we've got this little catch light. And now if I did the same thing, it would add that little bit of blip of light actually into the subject's face as well. Next thing to do is try and head towards a wall, okay, whether it's behind you or to the side of you. So in other words, if I had a white wall behind me, I can turn the flash around now to point behind me. And now this whole wall becomes a big light, yes? If it can physically do the amount of work that I need it to do, in other words, put all the light in there. In the same way as if I had a card here or a wall here, I can basically turn the flash and bounce it now to the side, and then it would bounce off the wall and come back onto the subject. As a rule, I would encourage you to try and change the direction of the flash at all stages. That would change its kind of quality away from where it looks like it's had flash on it to something that is more believable, more natural as well. Let's head over to here and let's kind of talk about the two other things, all right? So we talked about exposure, and we talked about ISO, and we talked about aperture. We talked about shutter speed. Now, shutter speed to begin with, the camera manufacturers tend to max out around about 200th of a second with a Speedlite before we have a shutter sync problem. That's where you see the black line running across some of your photographs. To shoot at a higher speed, in other words, 320th a second or so on, we just basically press the sync, and then we kind of see a new symbol come up, which is basically a lightning bolt with a H. That refers to high-speed sync. So in other words, learn where and what to press if you want to actually shoot in a higher shutter speed sync, what you can do straight away. So that's there. So this will allow us now to shoot at a much higher shutter sync. You'll find that some cameras, in fact, when you dial in a higher shutter speed, if it's not in high-speed sync, it basically reverts back to the camera default 200th of a second or whatever it would be, okay? So if we want to shoot higher, press it so you get the high-speed sync. Next tip is that the second curtain sync here is that if you're shooting in a very, very dark room and you've got dancers on a floor or wedding guests or whatever it is, instead of getting the flash to fire at the beginning of the exposure, we basically get it to fire at the end of the exposure. So if we're working on the likes of a 15th of a second, 8th of a second, 1 second long, whatever it would be, in normal flash mode, the flash would fire at the beginning of the exposure. In second curtain sync mode, okay, or second curtain flash mode, whichever it is for you, basically what it does, you start the exposure and just before the shutter finishes the exposure, it fires. So if we had somebody twirling towards camera position here, the flash would fire not at the beginning here, it would flash as it finished here. So in other words, all the light trail wouldn't be over the top of them if it fired here. So if you fired it in normal mode and they come towards you, the ambient light within the scene would give the light trail through them. However, if you fire it in second curtain sync mode, as they're spinning towards you and it fires, basically it cleans all the exposure and it gives you the best kind of image. So, remember what we were saying. The first things first, have the camera off and have the Speedlite off when you first attach it to the camera. Then you want to actually make sure when you've switched it on, you understand the basics of what the buttons are going to do. You understand how to clear it in case you've made any errors when you're fiddling. Remembering that ETTL is an automatic exposure based through your camera system. To change to a higher shutter speed and allow you to shoot with flash, you move it into high speed sync. To shoot with a slower shutter speed and to shoot with second curtain sync, you want the 3 arrows with the black arrow on the one side. In normal flash mode, there shouldn't be any of those little emblems showing at all. If you want to start then to actually play around away from an automatic exposure, ETTL, we can start to actually work in the different modes like manual and strobosonic. So through the lens does everything automatically. Manual needs you to set the power output of the flash. Strobosonic needs you to set through the amount of flashes it's going to make in a designated time, and that will give you like a strobe, a disco effect and things really. The only other real things to think about is the zoom option, but probably you're not going to want to actually worry about that when you're first getting going with your flash gun. Hope you've enjoyed this basic guide to setting up your Speedlite straight out of the box and taking your first photographs.